So my name is Nicole Smith. I am the Event and Communications Coordinator for Spark Niagara. We are an incubator hub in Niagara Falls. We have been doing these webinars for the last few months, and we are happy to do this. We do this in partnership with the South Niagara Chamber of Commerce, as well as the Niagara Falls Small Business Enterprise Center. We welcome you to this, and we welcome Matthew Peng from Scoro, who is here today to speak to us with regards to managing networks and building community, which in this time of COVID, building community is a huge deal, and we are so happy to have him join us. And without further ado, Matthew, I just hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be able to work in partnership with Spark Niagara to present today. So the topic of my presentation is managing networks and building community in a changing business reality. And that was a topic that I thought was really relevant and pertinent to the times that we're currently undergoing in terms of how we're how do we redefine business through our networks, and how do we engage with our client base and our community with so much going on, especially with so much being information being accessible online. The ideas and topics that I hope to cover off today, I hope are engaging and gives you some food for thought as to how you can perhaps begin to exercise and stretch and challenge yourself to open yourself up to new ideas as to how you can engage your own and build your own community in and amongst the noise. One of the main things that I'd love to ensure that you can take away from this presentation is that while we're going to be talking about the online presence of building a brand and building awareness, I hope to really talk to everybody and allow for everybody to sort of shift their mindset from having a sort of consumer of social media and technologies to more of a curator. So putting on a different hat when engaging these technologies. So that's my purpose and aim for today. I'm almost certain that everybody is on some form of social media platform and have various levels of degree and experience and exposure to those or addictions to those applications as well. So, it won't be a very, very basic level, but we'll definitely discuss some interesting ideas that should relate directly to where you are at with your business. For those that have arrived in late, my name is Matthew Peng. I am the product evangelist for Scoro, which is business management software. And we are working in partnership with Spark Niagara to be able to bring you this presentation, and also talk a little bit more about Scoro towards the very end and an offer available to all members. Just a little bit about my background and history. Before I joined Scoro as a product evangelist, I ran my own business, IT consulting business, for the last 6 years, and that was to assist lots of small to medium businesses to move and transition to the cloud using full business management systems, accounting systems, and the like, using cloud technology as opposed to desktop and server. So I've engaged with hundreds and hundreds of businesses in various industries and worked with them to manage the change and transition, that leap forward with regards to adapting their business. So I'll be sort of drawing on my experience in how I grew my business over that period of time. And look, I can honestly say that, starting business is a scary feat and venture if you're not yet, if you don't have the right sort of networks, and networks is something I'm going to be talking about today. I think you need that time to establish those networks, and well and truly, I was building and seeding my networks years in advance to be able to build up that courage to actually venture out on my own. So yeah, I'll be sort of talking about my journey and what I've observed and learned and picked up along the way as well. Just by way of a brief agenda, I'll just talk to you a little bit about three main ideas that I'd love to talk about today. Firstly, it's your personal brand, and just exploring that a little bit further. You may or may not be aware that you have a personal brand online or an online presence that you can grow and develop. So that's certainly an idea that I'd like to talk to you about today. Free versus paid attention, and exploring some of the various social platforms and the tools and mechanisms inside of those platforms that will allow you to leverage free attention to drive traffic to perhaps to your website or to your business, or paid attention. And a lot of businesses who start out think that they need to go straight for paid attention. There's a lot of trial and error, I think, actually associated with that, unless you've got a very hyper-focused approach to marketing. But we're going to explore both together. And lastly, the idea of fostering a community. How can we do that? Some ideas as to how to sort of develop, grow, and encourage community in and amongst your client base and potentially your prospective client base as well. And then, as Nicole mentioned, she'll be moderating questions towards the very end of the presentation. All right. So your personal brand. Where I always like to start with when I talk about personal brand is the individual. So, you know, we've got a room full of entrepreneurs, and you know, the idea of what makes you unique is a story that needs to be told. Why did you start your business? Why did you? What motivated you to make the leap from employee to employer, or what inspired you to follow and pursue that passion? That founder story is a very powerful story, I believe. And you know, you are the sum of all your own experiences, and so you've been developing your career to the point that you've taken the leap, and there's a story behind that I think is very relatable, very compelling, and can all add to your personal brand. You're going to encounter customers and people and people in your network that will ask, you know, about you and about your company, and you want to have not only a compelling pitch as to what service or product or offering that you're providing, but why you've decided to do it in and amongst potentially other competitors that do something fairly similar. So how do you stand out as a leader, as a founder, and provide a memorable and relatable story about you and what drives you and as a company and brand? So have a think about that in terms of what sort of story you're putting out there in and amongst social platforms. We'll jump into social platforms a little bit later, but thinking about your unique story. I'm sure you've thought about it, and you've probably talked about it to a certain few who may know the full story, but getting it out there is something that I would encourage you to do. Finding a platform that best represents you. So this is kind of where we sort of jump into some of the platforms that I'll be sort of exploring and talking about today. And I would also hazard a guess that you're very familiar with a lot of these logos or icons that I've sort of just thrown up with Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. You know, all have carved their own path and niche with regards to engagement, building their own a platform for community, advertising, as we all well and truly know. A lot of these platforms provide some form of advertising in order for it to get our attention. So I will talk a little bit about these, and I'm hopeful that that you've at least considered one or more of these platforms for your business in order to build a social or an online profile about your brand and about what matters to you, and about and also a mechanism and platform for customers to engage you socially as well. If you're really starting out in a brand new platform, and again, I'll talk about each of these platforms individually, it often is quite difficult to find the right place to start about sharing a brand. You know, you'll consider trying to do things like, I know when I first started business, you know, trying to make out or appear that you're bigger than you actually are. For instance, you know, some websites are behind the website, they're just a one-man band, one woman band, one woman show. You know, doing all parts of the business, marketing to administration, to sales, to delivery. And so, you know, it's tough to start, but what I want to encourage is the idea of celebrating the journey and not just the destination. Just the idea of sharing your founder story, sharing where you've come from and why this brand exists, and how you are going to progress as that brand. You know, celebrating those little wins, you know, whether it's a brand new customer that you want to give recognition to, or, you know, something that you've been able to do or impact in the lives of others that that is, you know, noteworthy or worthy of sharing on some of these platforms to generate engagement. And it's not necessarily just about generating engagement, but it's also just about yourself looking in and what you're doing that's making that difference on a daily basis. I think too often we get caught up in the accolades. I'm not sure what industries that you're currently servicing, but I'm sure that you're probably aware that there's some sort of badge, some sort of recognition that is probably out there that you'd love to attain. Now, if that's a goal of yours, fantastic. You know, set that goal for yourself. But then understanding how you're going to get there and what you want to do to achieve that, I think it is noteworthy to actually share in and amongst your clients, and it paints a beautiful picture that you're potentially going to make mistakes. You're going to listen to feedback and modify your products or services as you grow. Being reflective is very, very endearing, I think, and especially with lots of startups, it's very, very, very common to sort of see and read about those startup stories, especially, you know, rags to riches type stories. I listened to a podcast called How I Built This, where you get a lot of inspiration from founders of very large companies who came from very, very humble beginnings. And that was very encouraging for me. I would listen to, you know, hours and hours of podcasts and different stories just to kind of get that inspiration. And it really, truly is about that journey. So just in terms of the platforms that I'm going to sort of address today, I'm just going to lightly address them here, and then we'll talk about some deeper scenarios. So Instagram, I'm hopeful that if you've got a product that you're physically selling, that you've got an Instagram account. If it requires demonstration, or really the customer is going to get a really good understanding of what your product can do, just by visually looking at it. Instagram is a fantastic platform to leverage that as well. YouTube, fantastic platform for sharing ideas, for sharing long form content, for facilitating community as well. With regards to video, speaking to your audience, or creating an audience as well with your brand. LinkedIn, very much about the individual, about yourself as a professional, but also with the ability to float a company presence and post information and events and stories about your company. And it's a great place to publicize what's happening, what's new in your company. Twitter, I've found to be a fantastic short form medium for news and sharing of bite-sized pieces of news. It's pretty much where I go to for trending news locally and internationally, because you've got everyone is curating content, albeit they might be retweeting or they might be commenting, but they're all curating content. And often that content is instantaneous. It's on the ground, and it's certainly a great way to share and spread news quickly. And Facebook, really great for family networking in circles, I'd say for the most part, but it's certainly branched out to things like marketplaces. It's now housing so much video content these days, and it's a great way to kill time. Actually, I find Facebook, connecting again with friends and family is where I see Facebook working really well. And as a brand, as a startup, friends and family are going to be your probably first port of call to actually get the name and the brand out there. So hopefully you're also considering how Facebook can be leveraged for your brand as well. Okay, free versus paid attention. Now, just a few ideas around free versus paid attention. I think that there is, if you've developed a basic business plan, knowing your customer or knowing your audience is something that's a bit of a given. Who is your product or who is your service designed for? In terms of various key demographics. It could be age, sex, living location. Is it international, or are you purely just focusing on local markets? All the various key sort of statistics and parameters of who your key clients are. You should have a fairly good idea as to what your key and ideal customer looks like. But knowing your audience, I think, is the challenge that I'm going to put forward to you, is that the idea of really knowing your audience. Okay, so you've just sold a product to a customer. Hopefully, as you're still developing your business, you're able to actually speak to every single customer to get feedback. And maybe it's not initially, at least initially, but it's perhaps down the line to get feedback about the product or service. But weaving into that conversation, how did you find out about us? Was it on a particular social media platform? How often do you use that particular platform? Like I could tell you today, being in isolation, I've probably looked at Instagram at least a dozen times throughout the day, whether it's prompted or unprompted, through notifications or through just me being bored and wanting to engage online. So getting a bit of a picture as to how often your customers are actually engaging on these platforms can then drive how often you might choose to post, how often you might choose to advertise on these various platforms. So yeah, understanding what particular social platforms that they use, how often they might engage, are they, and if you do have one of those, for instance, an Instagram account, asking to follow them, for instance, if you follow them, and he or she follows you, understanding the type of individuals that they perhaps have connections with, Are there potential customers within their network that actually they can become an advocate for, which I'll talk a bit about a little bit later as well. But following a particular individual or company or brand is very, 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 very common in my job. The brands that I engage with, I'm looking at their social profiles and what level of engagement that they have, how often they're posting and what they're sharing. But similarly, I think customers will be looking at what you do as well. So knowing your audience is, kind of understanding what are their habits and tendencies on these various platforms. Do they post? Are they likely to post? Are they likely to even say good things about you if you were to mention them on those various platforms? You might have seen on Netflix, for instance, for those that have an account or share an account, there's a new documentary info. Let's call it a documentary about the social dilemma, it's just amazing how these companies are turning on, have the ability to turn on and turn off how much we engage with those platforms. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the individuals behind those smartphones. So really engaging and understanding your audience is the key takeaway there. So standing out from the crowd is sort of my take on free attention. How do you stand out from the crowd? You may be in and amongst, again, a very competitive sector or niche or industry, and they may have much more well-developed brands than yours, or they've paid a great deal more for that engagement and those customers. So exploring the idea of how you can develop free attention is really interesting to me. I don't just look at content on those platforms as a consumer. I look at it as a curator and just understanding the little tricks that or tips and tricks that I see every day. For instance, a very plausible thing could be that like I said, you've got customers that have that follow particular YouTube channels, for instance, that that, okay, so there could be content on a particular YouTube channel that would match your key demographic perfectly. So commenting or being prevalent on the comments and somehow getting surfaced towards the very top of the comment tree and chain can actually play to your strengths, as people love to engage with content that's posted on YouTube. For instance, Joe Rogan Experience, for instance, something that I watch from time to time. When I look at the comments, there's someone called the timestamp guy that literally will timestamp a 2 or 3 hour interview held by Joe Rogan, and then at the very bottom he or she says that they spend a lot of time curating all the timestamps. Please visit my site as a form of acknowledgement to drive traffic. So that's just one example. I'm not saying go to a particular channel and timestamp it. It may be something in line with what you do or offer as a service, who knows? But thinking creatively about how you can get some level of prominence on some of these platforms. I'm going to talk about something that happened in the last week. So as I was building out this deck, I wanted to use fairly recent examples. So for instance, here on this particular YouTube snippet that I've got on screen, the UFC, obviously blood sport, prize fighting, very, very popular amongst some. On the past weekend, Israel Adesanya defended his middleweight title, and lots and lots of people jumped on that bandwagon. I think from memory, there were, or from the research that I did, there was at least 781 million impressions about UFC 253. Now, this particular YouTuber, Brian Sutter, MD, he has a following of about 275,000 subscribers. And in one day, he's been able to generate 1.2 million eyeballs. Now, he's a doctor commenting on something that's very, very popular and pertinent. And if you follow his channel or look at his channel, he's commenting about very, very prominent sporting events, injuries, and I guess also being a prize fight and betting and all that sort of stuff that goes on with associated with sports. People want to know, how fit are the contenders, et cetera, so they're looking for this type of insight and intelligence. But you can see very, very clearly he's actually advertising a brand called Fubo TV. That's a prominent sponsor that he's generating revenue from. Now, I'm not saying start a YouTube channel, generate revenue through developing an audience, but I'm just suggesting that there are trends and there are things that you can actually leverage that will generate a large amount of eyeballs if you can think about how you could potentially generate free attention in and amongst your ideal client customer profile. Here's just another example that's probably more closer to home. For instance, Scoro just developed a short explainer video to kind of introduce us as a brand to the world. And Waldencroft, which actually was a recent customer of Scoro's, posted the video unprompted, and it generated a bunch of likes and comments. And if you were to read through those comments, a lot of it was about thanking them for, making them aware of this particular brand. So the content that you generate, however big or small, obviously you're wanting to generate content that is bite-sized and shareable, can pay dividends on platforms like, in this particular case, it was LinkedIn, where potential customers in your network are able to promote, share something that they believe and they align with as part of their brand. So again, this is just free attention, and this drove traffic, eyeballs, and trialists to our site. So again, if you're in that sort of SaaS and technology space, thinking about videos that clearly explain your brand or introduce your brand, and what it can actually do for the end clients, is something you can do to perhaps generate free attention. The last point that around free versus paid attention, and it's not really designed to be, one's better than the other. It's really just exploring the idea of both. With paid attention, everyone knows that they're being advertised to. So it's a matter of getting to your point as quickly as possible. And you really do, on depending on what platform you actually have, and your consumers of content yourself, you'll know how long you've got as a threshold or tolerance before you turn off a particular ad or you navigate away. So for instance, I've just got some examples. I'm just using Instagram in this particular case. And you'll note that it clearly says it's a sponsored ad in and amongst my feed, for instance. For whatever reason, Quad Lock Cycle picking me as an ideal customer, and it's got to explain what you do very, very quickly, and illustrate that very, very quickly, either in pictorial form or in video form. My next example is probably more focused on video form. I just took a screenshot as the customer is seen navigating through the app to purchase some glasses or spectacles. And so you kind of, what I'm effectively saying is that if you're going to go down the path of paid attention, you kind of need to be able to grab the attention of a user or a potential customer as quickly as possible. And look, I think everyone knows that, but just clearly spelling it out that, it's a very, very much a platform and a medium that I think is still very new, and I think is very, very valuable. Someone else who I also follow and admire from afar is Gary Vaynerchuk, who loves Instagram as a platform, and often reminds his audience base that Instagram ads are very, very cheap. They're still a very, very cheap form of attention. And again, as I said, if you've developed a product that requires some explanation through visual aid, you want to consider Instagram. You really do, whether it be in video form or in pictorial form as well. Now, one thing that I noticed as I was grabbing these particular ads, I actually noticed that if you can see on my screenshot, I took a screenshot at 8:46, 8:47, and 8:48. So Instagram, just purely by doing this exercise, I can tell is advertising to me on average once every minute. So they're probably looking at the length of time that I'm spending on Instagram and going, okay, this is probably the interval. I mean, check it out for yourself in terms of maybe you're being advertised too fast or slower. I don't know, but I think that cadence of once per minute is probably about right, and probably is very, very acceptable for that particular platform. What I was also going to say about Instagram and getting your point across as quickly as possible, I actually looked at these 3 ads. And look, they somehow decided to target me, little old me. But of the 3, I could consider installing an app. I could potentially consider buying a quad lock cycle, phone mount, and yeah, sure, I wear glasses too, and I might be considering in the market for glasses. These type of suggestive ads really do plant seeds, and it comes down to how often you're engaging with, say, Instagram or see this ad in your feeds. But the one thing that I'd probably comment, just as I've sort of laid out here, and I've talked about engaging with various platforms, I actually think the opportunity to actually shop now or install now is actually not, it is the end game to actually be able to capture your customers and get them to action or jump onto your call to action. But I actually think the better game is to actually have a Instagram user either like, comment, or share your content. I believe that is the better objective than to actually get them to install now or shop now, because then you can kind of move from paid medium to free attention. And so, for instance, with Instagram, if you're an Instagram user, you'll be aware that they offer something called Instagram stories. And if you've ever seen Instagram stories, when you log on and refresh your page on Instagram, they appear right at the top. So immediately you can start, a user will engage with the Instagram stories. And stories is becoming a popular means and mechanism to communicate very, very short bursts of content. that's up to date and fresh, and doesn't have to be highly edited. So you're able to share content in, using, very powerful cameras and video cameras on our smartphone devices. Communicate a message very, very quickly using stories, and you'll see them crop up on LinkedIn now and Facebook obviously as well. And so stories is I think that next level of engagement. It's kind of like the first 3 results of the Google page. I think it's the equivalent to that now. And so moving from paid attention to capture or build a base to then leverage free attention, I think liking and following and engaging with your brand has a far better outcome than simply the call to action. Because I think it will take a little bit of time for someone to trust your brand until they actually look at your brand more closely and happy customers. Certainly, I've seen lots of brands, startup brands, promote short videos with testimonials from their customers, and that's always a great way to kind of see how customers react to products. Okay, so hopefully I've given you some ideas there around free versus paid attention, and how you could potentially capture some of that, or some ideas that can challenge you in where you're at in your brand and journey with regards to capturing attention. My third and final topic that I wanted to talk about today is about fostering community. And community is a very hard thing to start from scratch, but I do think it first stems from your first and early customers, and being able to engage with them, getting their feedback, and then ultimately engaging them to a point where they can become advocates for your brand, influencers, if you'd like, to be able to speak to their networks, both in person and online, about a product that they're extremely happy with, that they would feel comfortable recommending. And it comes down to just seeking out feedback. It's always good to get, obviously, good feedback, but really taking on board the constructive feedback that customers give, and then just circling back with them to actually say, hey, we've implemented some of those ideas and suggestions that you had. Tell me what you think. And that sort of does speak volumes as to how engaged of a brand and that you are. For instance, to bring it back again closer to home with Scoro, we release features every month, or that is in terms of a roadmap, we've got feature roadmaps to be released every month. Obviously with COVID, things have slowed down a little bit, but we are constantly cycling in feedback and incorporating small changes and iterations based on that feedback all the time, along with big ticket items and large enhancements that form part of the longer term roadmap as well. So, and that certainly does turn existing customers and build and generate rapport with those customers, as I'm sure you would already know. But yeah, fostering and starting to grow a community, it starts with that core first few customers. And I'm hopeful that you've already started to engage your customer base to actually get both good and constructive feedback that you can build out and then turn into advocacy. If you're wondering what sort of platforms you could potentially use to capture feedback as well, if perhaps one-on-one engagement is not feasible, obviously your Google reviews. Things like Trustpilot, for instance, is a sort of a paid platform that you potentially could consider if you're wanting to rapidly develop a profile or a level of trust for prospective customers to buy more confidently. When it comes to fostering a community, I also highly recommend involving your entire team. I might have mentioned a little bit earlier that, you know, you're probably, as the founder, you're probably the chief marketing officer at the same time. And, you know, you're taking on all these tasks, and it's often not a one-dimensional, but there's typically one voice that's coming through on the social platforms. But if you've got a growing team, they're more than likely also on some of these platforms as well that you're on. And getting them involved to actually speak and engage the customers to get their feedback, to really even share how proud that they are of working in your company, and the work that output that you produce, all comes about to strengthen multiple connections with your company through your staff. Obviously, you can implement some guidelines about tone and all the like, but certainly I think it's very, very acceptable to have a little disclaimer that says my opinions are my own and not my company's, and that's sort of that's a little bit of a backdoor out for most. So I would highly encourage the idea of not just keeping that singular voice for your brand, but really encouraging your staff and your team to actually think about following and engaging your customers so that they can feel connected with the customer as well. And my final point around fostering community is creating content that matters. I think with a lot of advertisements that we see online, it's very clear that we're being marketed to about the benefits of a particular product or service that you're offering. Maybe it's a premium service, and therefore a certain feeling or association with your brand is being communicated differently to maybe a fast-moving consumable good, right? The challenge with creating content that matters, or the opportunity, if you want to put it that way as well, is that with all these social platforms, I mean, there's obviously a generation of people who don't know anything else but social media platforms. They didn't really sort of engage with television or radio the same way that perhaps some of the older people on this particular call have in the past, right? So, but it's very clear to see right now that every user profile, they have an opinion and a voice, some more vocal than others. The ones that are more vocal are the ones that you probably want to engage with, especially if they can align with your values and your brand. So creating content that matters is probably more about what do you want to also additionally achieve as a brand and as a company. Why did you start this company? At the end of the day, obviously it's to improve the lives of your customers, but there's also, I think, there's this other subplot or sub message or sub goal that I think all companies can achieve or contribute to, the conversation about, what's happening in the current state of affairs, whether it's COVID or it's Black Lives Matter or it's some other significant event, right? Elections or whatever it might be. I mean, that's a bit of a touchy subject, but creating content that matters or matters to your community is something that I think I'm noticing people are doing more and more, but I don't think, I think it could be done better. And there's an opportunity there for yourselves to think about the things that you value, the things that your brand wants to support and back, that you can actually get involved in some of those conversations. And, it'll pay dividends. It will draw the right customers, or the customers that that align with what you're trying to achieve, not just from a commercial sense, but from a societal sense. And that community aspect, I think, is far more powerful, far more long-standing than any quick sale or one-time sale that you can generate from your community. You're going to have a lifetime, potentially a lifetime customer if they can engage with you at a deeper level and not just at a commercial level. Okay, so I'm going to suggest that it's now it's time for Q&A, and I'm going to sort of invite Nicole back to jump back online and sift through the questions. Just while, before we jump to questions, I might just quickly throw up a very quick slide that just sort of explains that Scoro, being part of a partnership with Spark Niagara, have actually provided an offer for all members. So you can simply start a trial at Scoro.com, and you can, if you want to enter in the voucher code *Spark_Niagara, get 20% off of a subscription for the first 3 months to see whether or not it will suit the needs of your business. And obviously we can engage with you on that as well. So yeah, I'd love to open up for questions and see what's on your mind.
Well, thank you so much, Matthew. This has been a chock full of information, very interesting, very, very well laid out. So thank you so much for such a great presentation. I appreciate that. So I'd like to encourage anybody who has a question, please go ahead and put that question in the chat box, and we will address it. So while we're waiting for that, Matthew, I have just a quick question. So
Sure.
you laid out various social media platforms and did a fantastic job of explaining I guess the penchant or the specificities of each one of those and how to best utilize them, and that's great. But I noticed there's one that was left out, and it's of interest to me or anybody who's working with young people, and that's TikTok. Have you figured out anything with that world?
Yes, actually, in preparation for this, TikTok was one of those borderline ones that I was going to include, but I thought was too fringe for perhaps this audience. I wasn't sure. I found it to be a really fun and innovative way to create lots and lots of viral content. And that it's kind of, all right, if I was to sort of try to encapsulate and sum it up, I think it really has it's a really beautiful marriage of Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. It's kind of like it's got these elements of all these applications that allows anybody to curate video content that is, you know, highly shareable, often designed to engage, you know, get a laugh, or you know, invoke a following or a response. It's definitely something that brands are cottoning onto in terms of attention and eyeballs. It's a fantastic. It's actually probably the medium that I would think is reinventing engagement in a lot of ways. Yeah, so I left it off the slide on this particular occasion, but I did sort of think about talking about it as well. I just thought I'd stay with the mainstay ones at this stage. But yeah, it's a fascinating platform, and it's creating, I think, this new generation of influencers at an alarming rate. Yeah, it's very, very exciting as a platform, I think.
Okay. Yes, I have to admit I'm a little gun shy because of just, yeah, but it is a fun platform. It's fun to watch, and I'm sure it's fun to create with. So another question that I have is recently I came to my attention that Instagram, besides having stories, they have reels,
Yes.
REELS. Do you have any thoughts on those, on how to utilize those effectively?
Oh, I don't have any specific examples that I've sort of seen used well. Um, I guess I just encourage experimentation. I would probably just be looking from afar from some brands that are leveraging that more so. I'm finding that Instagram Live is a fantastic way. Talk about capturing the journey. Just using that, you could be just at a picturesque location, you just visited a client, could be anything as simple as that, and just sort of logging on, engaging with an audience, and sharing the picturesque view. That it could be as simple as that to kind of brighten someone's day, or maybe it's the ghost town of your local CBD, right? And how quiet it is because of what's going on at the moment. So it's that sort of engagement that I think that's live and snappy. It doesn't have to have a lot of thought or scripting behind it. But yeah, going back to Instagram Reels, I don't have a fully formed opinion on that at the moment.
Okay, well, I know it's fairly new, so I was just wondering, because it is intriguing, and it's almost, the word is like, it's so new, it's like jump on it now or you're going to miss your opportunity, which as an entrepreneur, having to do all these other pieces, it's almost anxiety creating, because you're like, oh my goodness, I'm going to miss out on this too,
I get you totally.
Okay, so I'm looking, and our audience members have not included any questions at this point. If you do have a question, please feel free to do that. If you would like to unmute yourself to do that, I will be okay with that. I'm sure, Matthew, you'll be okay with that as well. So
Sure.
if you do have a question, please feel free to do that. We're just going to hold on for just a few more minutes, and then we'll definitely go from there. Okay.
Well, I've got this sort of other slide. If you guys would like to perhaps ask a question, maybe after the fact, or perhaps for those that are watching the recording. But I'd really love to work with you. Hopefully you've gotten something out of today's presentation, and if you want to perhaps have a separate discussion about your brand, and where I can sort of perhaps provide some comment or commentary or suggestions. I love that sort of stuff. I've worked with numerous businesses, engineering various aspects of their business, and yeah, I'd be privileged to work with you on working out some spitballing some ideas with you. But also, I'd love to hear from you if you've actually implemented anything that I've suggested today, and you found it to be effective, or it's starting to show or bear some fruit. I'd really love to hear those sort of stories as well as feedback. So yeah, thank you so much for having me, Nicole, and I look forward to hearing from the community.
And thank you, Matthew, for taking the time to do this with us this morning.